my first house was a dud. And the reason I say that is because I bought my first house in 2008. For those of you who pay attention to real estate, not the best time to buy. So the market crashed right around 2007 into 2008 and it started tanking down. And I saw all these foreclosures, I saw all these short sales, and I said, this is the time to buy. This must be it. Look at everything's going down. I'm jumping in. So I bought a single family home in a city I had not lived in before. This was when I was working up in Boston. I lived in Fall River, and I was working in Boston. My drive was an hour every day, and so I decided I was going to move to a city that was in between here in Boston. So I moved to Taunton, and Taunton is a great place, but I didn't know it, and my real estate agent didn't know it. And so we were looking around at all these different foreclosures, and she was getting frustrated with me and my girlfriend at the time, and she was showing us all this different stuff. She was a sweetheart, and I remember finally deciding, okay, let's not look at $120,000 house anymore. Let's go up to the $180,000 houses. And we kept looking, and the houses got a little bit better, but there was still houses missing pipes, and the houses were small, or the yards were small. There was all this compromise. And as a real estate agent now, I completely understand what we were doing. And I have a name for us as buyers. We were the people looking for the unicorn. We were the buyers who were looking for that dream, that beautiful, mystical creature up in the sky that doesn't actually exist. We wanted the amazing deal, big, beautiful house on a very, very small budget. But because we thought, hey, we'll just fix things. HGTV, I watched 1,000 episodes. That was one of the common grounds I had with my girlfriend at the time, is that all we did was love watching HGTV. So we were in one of those episodes. We'd go into a house and say, we could do this, we could do that, we could blow all this out. It's going to be amazing. But we learned. We learned slowly over time. And I think I was just a slow learner back then when it came to things. I just had in my head that we were going to get this, and that's what I was going after. So I remember we eventually upped our price to the 220 range. And then the houses got significantly better. The yards were bigger, and the houses were bigger. To me, it was always important to have a big yard. It's something that now I look at and I say, I don't want a big yard because that means maintenance. But back then, it was very important to me. I was a hard worker, and I liked the idea of having my yard the same way my grandfather had his, with the trees, the fruit trees, the garden, everything manicured all nice. I wanted a big garage so I could work on my cars. That was the things that were important to me at the time, and the house wasn't as important. I said, I can fix anything. So we found this house. It was the best house in the worst neighborhood, and it still needed work. It was a real fixer-upper, but we ended up getting a great deal on it. So our real estate agent said we should put in an offer around $200,000 because they had it on the market for $220,000. We should put in $200,000, and she thought it would be a good deal. And I knew it was a short sale, and I said, maybe we should put an offer around $180,000. And our agent said, no way. That's going to really piss them off. It's going to make them angry. They're not going to like this. So after counseling with my girlfriend at the time, we put in an offer for $170,000. We said, this real estate agent is not looking out for us. We're just going to go put on our own crazy offer. Now, if you got a good agent, they're not going to say that. They're not going to say, that's not a good thing in a time when the market's just turning. A good agent will say, put in an offer that makes sense for you. And if you get it, you get it. And if you don't, you don't. Who cares? I didn't care if I got the house or not. But it doesn't matter. So we put in an offer for $170,000, and it went to the bank, and the bank was very close to losing the house. It was very, very close to just everything falling apart, and they were watching the market turn down, and I guess the bank went out of business. I don't remember the name of the bank now, but they were going out of business. So they made the decision to accept our offer at $170,000, which always made me wonder, should I have asked for a little bit less? But, it's in the past. But it's always in the back of my head. I bet you I could have gotten $160,000 or $150,000. I just don't know. So anyway, we get into this house, and this thing is a real fixer-upper. I remember bringing my uncle into it. My uncle was a carpenter at the time for 27 years, been in the trade his whole life. And my uncle got in, and he looked around and he said, Walter, there's a lot of work here. This is a big project. This is a lot. I said, yeah, we can do it, right? Like, it's not that big of a deal. You're a carpenter. I'm willing to work. We got this. And he was like, look, if you want to do this, yeah, I'll help you. And I remember my aunt was there, his wife, and she's looking at him, and she's looking at me, and she's thinking, I'm not going to see my husband for a long time. And that was true. So, but my family supported me in this, and I moved moved forward, and we closed on this house in Taunton. It was 1,200 square feet, built in 1760 was the year. So this thing was pre-freedom. Like, this house was before we were a free American state, right? A free American country. So it had tree beams in the basement. Had post power beam. It had been through a whole lot of stuff. It had 3 different additions on it. This thing was a mess. It really was. But we worked on it for the next 4 years, just renovating the heck out of it. While the market was turning down, we were dumping money into this house, trying to bring it back up, trying to bring up the value, just trying to really. I think a lot of times I didn't even care about the value of the house. I was just trying to make the house what I wanted it to be, what my girlfriend at the time wanted it to be. And to us, we wanted everything new. So we ripped out all the paneling, we ripped out all the old wood beams. Their floors were crooked and sagging. So we actually ripped out the entire second floor, all the floor joists all the way across, and we leveled it all out, put new LVL beams all the way across, straight new hardwood floors on the second floor. We raised up the ceiling on the second floor because originally they were right up to my head. I had 2 inches to walk. So we raised them up to be full 8-foot height ceilings. And we used, I can't remember what they called, but baffles and vents. We insulated the entire thing, framed everything right up to code. My uncle was there with me for weeks and weeks and weeks. Every weekend he was over. He'd give me a big list of things to do on Sunday, and he'd hand it to me. And all during the week after work, I'd work all day. I'd drive my hour home, and I'd come home, I'd switch my clothes out, and I'd just start working, start renovating. It was pulling out blown insulation, filling up bags of construction debris, running wires, running plumbing with my father. My father taught me how to run electrical. He taught me how to do plumbing. Thankfully, he had these skills that his father passed down to him, and then I learned how to insulate. I learned how to frame. I learned how to drywall. I learned how to mud. All from my uncle and my father. Between the two of them, they knew everything in the trade. And I'll never forget. We actually had one incident while we were opening the second floor. We were trying to put everything back in place, and my uncle, he cut a pipe. He cut one of the water mains, one of the water radiators, and there was water everywhere, just all over the kitchen, because the kitchen was underneath it. And he told me, he's like, I've been in the trade 27 years. I have never, ever cut a pipe. And in my nephew's house, I cut a pipe. He's like, he was so heartbroken. He was so embarrassed. But it was just great to have my family there doing these projects with me, and just putting so much effort and so much care and so much concern that they had for me in this project. He paid for the plumber. He solved that whole problem and worked it out for us. And it was just, that whole project was really, it was a product of passion and love between my family and myself. We all put a lot into it. My grandparents were still alive back then. I remember my grandmother, 60 something years old, grabbing up all this wood and throwing it in the fire. The fire is, this tall, and she's like this small, like down here. She's maybe 4 feet, and the fire is, 12 feet tall, and she's going up to it, just tossing wood in there and walking away like a boss. All a lot of good memories in that house, right? But at the end of it, it cost so much building up the value. We already put down a down payment of $8,500, and then closing costs back then were $8,500. We didn't ask for the seller to pay closing costs. We didn't know that was an option, and also it was a short sale, so maybe they wouldn't have agreed to that. But we didn't know. We didn't know any better, and our real estate agent really wasn't taking care of us the way that they could have. Right? They weren't investors. They were just firing people through the transactions. And at the end of that kind of renovation period, we ended up breaking a leak in the roof. Our roof started leaking, and we didn't have money. We were out of funds. So my grandparents came to me. My grandmother told me, she said, look, my grandson, we're going to take care of you. We have the money. We'll pay for it. You have the contractor come in and do it. We've got enough work going on right now. We're still mid-project. We cannot go do the roof and do all this. She said, I'm going to pay for a roofer to come in and do the roof for you, and we'll continue the work downstairs and the rest of the house. So that was the first time I ever borrowed money from my family. That was $10,000 I borrowed to finish the roof and finish the rest of the projects. And that was tough for me, because I've always worked for everything I have and always done it myself. And I'll never forget the day I paid them off. It was the greatest feeling, just knowing that I took a loan from my family and I paid them off. It was huge. Literally everything that could have been done for me in that house was done for me. My family took very, very good care, helping me work, helping me pay things off. But at the end of the day, like, if it didn't work out, it was on me. But it was nice knowing that my family was there. The bad thing was that as I'm dumping money into this, we ended up over time. I did the math. It ended up being $20,000 of renovations we put into it, plus 18,000 down that we put into this thing, or 17,000 down that we put into it. It was like $37,000 we put into this property, and then when we sold it, we walked away with $34,000. Which is 4 years later, we sold it, and we basically lost $3,000 on the house when you look at everything that we put into it. But we were thankful to walk away with a check. In 2012, that was the absolute bottom of the market, 2010, 11, 12. So we were lucky to walk away with something when we did sell the property, because a lot of people didn't. But we put a lot of work into it. We really sweat and put a lot of money into it. So when I did the math, we lived in this house paying a mortgage of $1,400, $1,500 a month every single month for 4 years, and then broke even when we sold the property. So I looked at that as not a good investment, right? I could have rented and broken out the same way without having to do all the renovations, without having to do all the work. So it was a very important lesson to be learned there, that you never own what you live in, right? You want to rent what you live in, and you want to rent what you own. You know, tough concept to grasp. Nobody talks about it. But when you do the math, the way I did, it actually cost me $40,000 to $50,000 to live in that house, basically paying a rent the whole time, even though I owned a house and it's supposedly the best investment. So at that point, I started saying, okay, house isn't really working out as an investment. I got to come up with some sort of way to get out of this. This brings me back to the store where I was cutting the grass and lord of the land, and realized I'm like the lord of paying bills for a house. I'm broke for the house. I'm house poor was what I was. So I started looking at all these deals around me. This was 2011. I started really being like, come on, we got to do something. The house next door is $80,000 right now. I should be able to buy this, renovate it just the way I renovated mine, and sell that thing, or even rent it out at that price. I could rent it out and make money. So I start calling the banks. Hey guys, this is Walter Morello. I own a property. I work a full-time job. My girlfriend works a full-time job. We're ready to start being real estate investors. We want to buy our second home to flip it. And the bank said, okay, yeah, no problem. Do you have 20% down? And I was like, no, I bought the first one with 3% down. Give me the 3% package. You know, give me the FHA 3% package. Again, that's the one I want to do. And they're like, you said you already own a home. You can't do that again. That's a no-go. We don't do that. And I was having a hard time with this. So I had the opportunity right in front of me, and I had $10,000 in my pocket, but it was not going to get me an $80,000 house plus the money to renovate it. And I remember not knowing anything about hard money, being terrified of hard money. Even if I did know about it, I would have been too scared to do anything. And not having any kind of connections, no way to do this. The houses, the deals were all around me, and I could do nothing with them. And I said, okay, I'm not going to do a flip. I'll buy a rental. I'll buy a 3-family rental. So I call up the same thing, say, you know, I'm gonna buy this 3-family rental. I'm ready to do it. I got the down payment, 3%, and they said, nope, you can't do that either. The only way that you can go and buy a 3-family is if you sell your single-family house. And now I'm thinking, sell my single-family house, buy a 3-family, and then I could buy another single-family house. Perfect plan, no problem. I've already renovated this thing. I'm bored with it anyway. So I go and I tell my wife at the time, I ended up marrying her. I tell my wife, this is the plan. This is what we're going to do. We're going to sell the house, and we're going to go move forward. And she says, no. I love this house. We've worked so hard to get it to this point. We are not selling it. You're crazy. I will divorce you if you decide to do that. And so I didn't decide to do that. And another year I sit on this, you know, just trying to figure out a plan. So I have my garage, and I'm thinking, okay, I love the garage, I love the cars, but if I move my driveway over here, I can split the land and I can build a house where my garage is. So I started doing all the research and, you know, plot plans and all this stuff. And I realized that it's a lot of work. And again, a lot of money, which I didn't have. I still had the $10,000 plus maybe another $2,000, $4,000 I'd saved up. but it wasn't going to cut it. It wasn't going to get me a project that I wanted out of that area. They weren't going to give me the loan. So again, I approach my wife and I say, look, honey, I think this would be a great idea for us to sell this house. We buy a 3-family, live in it for a little while, and then we go and we buy our single family. We'll, make some money, and it will pay for the house, right? And it took me about 3 months to convince her, and she still wasn't convinced. So what I did was I put the house on Zillow. I put it on Zillow sell me offer, like the sell me offer, something like that, which I thought was just a thing for me to do. I thought I was just like filling out a checklist of, yeah, you know what? I thought it was a game. Like, okay, if somebody offered me this, I would sell the house in a heartbeat. Offer me $250,000 and I'll sell my house. And a real estate agent called and said, hey, you know what? I think I got somebody to buy that house for $250,000. I said, you do? I just called my wife. I was like, babe, $250,000, they'll buy the house. She's like, sell it. We're done. Yeah, we'll bounce real quick. She was on that. And the real estate agent comes in and she's taking pictures and she's saying, this house is amazing. This is great. This is such a great house. She has done an amazing job taking pictures, making us feel really, really awesome. And at the end, she says, you know what? I think I could sell it for $230. I look at my wife and I look at her and I said, $230, babe, what do you think? And she's like, wait, we didn't say $230. And hold on, there's not a buyer who wants to buy it right now. Like, you're a real estate agent and not $250, and you're talking about putting on the market. And she's like, we need 24 hours to think about this. We're not doing this. And then when the real estate agent left, she leaned into me. She was mad. She was very mad that this all happened, and I was pretty defensive because I didn't see it coming either. But at the end of that conversation, we did talk and we did the math, and we said, you know what? If we can get $230 out of this, even $220, because now we're thinking the commissions, it's going to chip us down to $220 as we're going to make out of it, we'll put it on the market, and we'll do that. So we put it on the market. And I'm cutting the grass every single week, twice a week. We're cleaning the house every single weekend for these open houses with a lot of work. Selling your house, anybody who says selling your house is easy has never sold a house. At this point, I have sold 4 of my own personal properties, and it's a stressful situation every single time. So I'm very honest with my sellers. It's going to suck, but there's a reward at the end. So we're doing all this, and it's been on the market 3 months. My buddy bought a house at the same exact time. His house is already under agreement. He's got a $100,000 profit coming out of his, and I'm looking just to break even on mine. We ended up selling it for $208 with $5,000 towards the closing costs for the seller. So we ended up making $203 out of this. My note was somewhere around, I think I owed $160 something. And I know I walked away with $34,000 on the transaction. And for us, we said, you know what? It's something. It gets us onto the next project. And we ended up moving forward, moved into my father's house at the time, his apartment, where he was living in my grandfather's building. And my father actually was living there with us back and forth, and we were living in it with him. It was a very tight situation because all of our stuff was packed in front of his stuff. We also owned a wedding invitation business at the time, which we took over the entire kitchen, and we took over the entire hallway with cutting machines and printers. And my dad was very, very patient with us as we were trying to run this business, and my wife was very, very stressed. But she was an angel. She was very good about it. Even though she was very stressed and having a hard time, she did help with everything. She excelled in the business, and she excelled in making sure that we're always at the showings, making sure we're always looking at all these different multifamilies we're looking for. So we put a house under agreement, a 3-family, and it took us 10 months to close on that house. We were supposed to be in there. We put it under agreement the day we were moving into my father's house. We went in there, we put an offer in. The day we were moving, my real estate agent Jim called me up and said, hey, this is the one, you got to get here. There's 15 people here. If you don't buy it, I'm going to buy it. Because he's an investor. So I said, this is the trigger. Like, this is how I know. Look, it's a good deal. We've been to 100 different houses. This is the one. So we go in, we put an offer on the house. Our offer is accepted. We bought a 3-family house for $157,000. And it took 10 months to close that house. So we were thinking, we're going to close on this in 2 months. and we'll be able to move right in. We'll fix everything, we'll move into one of the units. And it took us 10 months of just torture, not knowing when it was going to close, if it was going to close. Me and my wife arguing and fighting about, this was the dumbest thing we ever did. We had a beautiful house, our life was perfect, and now we're stressed and everything is just falling apart. And there was some really, really tough times between her and I, and between just life in general. We were working these jobs that we hated. We were both driving an hour up to work again, and it was a tough time. But I'm thankful for those moments because it showed us who we were and what we actually had. And we finally did close on it. We closed on the house in 2013. So we sold our single family in 2012. We closed on our new house, the multifamily, the 3-family, in September of 2013. So it was 10 months of just torture. And I remember we closed on the house and I'm renovating it, and I had another house under agreement. I had a 2-family right next door under agreement. Beautiful, beautiful second floor. It was 1,400 square feet, 2 massive bedrooms. I had the space for the business. Everything was perfect in that unit. And I remember me and my wife having these massive arguments about being, my dad's house, just being here like cramped and stuck and not being able to really live our lives the way that we're used to. And we owned our own house. We owned our own garage. We had all this space. It was just ours. And as my dad was very open and very available to let us do whatever we wanted, but our stuff was half packed because we didn't want to unpack everything. It was all hidden behind things. The house was very cluttered because it was his stuff and our stuff packed in front of it. So it was just a stressful time. So I made a decision. I said, look, babe, why don't we just move into the 3-family? And once we get into the 3-family, then when we finally close on the 2-family, because we don't know when this thing's going to close. Again, this was supposed to close right after the 3-family. We're supposed to close the day after, and they ran into problems with separating the septic, there was some water issues, so they had to replace the roof, and the sellers actually lost the house. So there was a lot of issues in between closing from that house to the next house.